Last week, I was advised by our integrity unit that one of our Wallabies and Queensland Red players, James Slipper, had returned a positive test for cocaine. The integrity unit reported that this was James's second confirmed positive test for cocaine, recorded from urine samples collected at his home. Under Rugby Australia's illicit drugs policy, the first instance of a positive test remains confidential between the player, the Rugby Australia Integrity Unit and medical staff. This is treated purely as a health and welfare issue, and the player is provided with the appropriate professional support and placed in a target testing pool. James recorded his first positive test for cocaine in February. Earlier this month, James returned a second positive test. A second violation attracts a mandatory period of ineligibility and is referred to a drugs tribunal for consideration. The tribunal conducted its hearing last Thursday here at the Rugby Australia building, with James Slipper joining the hearing via teleconference. The panel consisted of Judge Mark Williams, SC of the New South Wales Supreme Court, and a member of the Court of Arbitration for Sport, Barrister Mr Terry Willis and sports lawyer Mr Stephen Cottrell. The tribunal has now submitted its written determination to Rugby Australia, ordering James to undertake the mandatory minimum period of ineligibility of 2 months and pay a fine of $27,500. We are extremely disappointed to be in this position today, with one of our most senior international players having submitted 2 positive tests for cocaine. We are fully aware that James is dealing with very significant personal issues, and we have been working with him since February on these matters. We are ensuring that James is receiving full help and support, including specialist medical treatment. James has expressed his sincere remorse for his actions and for placing himself, Rugby Australia and the Reds in this very difficult situation. It is an incredibly challenging time for him and his family, and our immediate focus is on James's health and well-being while he undertakes an enforced period of absence from the game. I will now hand over to Ross Xenos, CEO of Rupa, to read a statement from James Slipper, and then I'm very happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Raelene. James can't be with us today, so I'd like to share this statement on his behalf. It is with great regret that I feel it necessary to explain recent events. Unfortunately, I am unfit to personally address these issues today. I'm well aware that I will need to address these issues publicly and the questions associated with this, and will do so as soon as I'm fit and ready. I've been suffering wellness issues, including depression, for a year, and have been receiving professional assistance for the last few months. The advice is that I will make a speedy and total recovery. In no way do my personal circumstances excuse my actions, but I recognise now that I was not coping and that I need to properly address these wellness issues. Recently, I breached the illicit drugs policy of Rugby Australia, and as a consequence have been stood down from playing rugby for a 2-month period and have also received a fine. I take full responsibility for my actions and apologise unreservedly to my family, the Queensland Rugby Union, Rugby Australia, my teammates, coaches and all rugby supporters. I'd like to thank everyone who has continued to support me in this most difficult time, and I fully intend to be a better, more well-adjusted person. There is no place for illicit drugs in sport. I ask that you respect my privacy at this time until I'm ready to comment publicly. Regards, James Slipper.
Raelene, how much of a balancing act is it? How much of a balancing act is it sending out a message against drugs and also while taking that into consideration?
The mental health issues, yeah, certainly when you have, firstly there's no place for illicit drugs in sport, and it's a subject that we at Rugby Australia and also within our super clubs do a lot of work with our players to make sure they understand that. In saying that, whilst balancing a very difficult personal issue was certainly the basis on which the tribunal reached their final findings.
Raelene, does Australian rugby have an issue with drugs and cocaine on the whole?
Yeah, we do over 500 tests a year between WADA and illicit drug testing, and the results of that would suggest that there is no issue for Rugby Australia in relation to illicit drugs.
What was James? Have you had a conversation with James, Raelene?
I haven't been dealing specifically with James. I haven't, really had a chance to form a relationship with James yet, but certainly the people within our organisation and the Reds organisation that have more established relationships have been working very closely with him. Because, this is, as we said, a difficult balancing act, and we need to make sure that the message is clear that his behaviour is unacceptable, but that needs to be taken in context of the welfare issues that he's facing.
Do you know if Michael Checkers?
Michael has spoken to him, yes he has.
Any news on, James's response apart from that statement, when that second test came back positive?
Oh, well, I think the statement says it all, really. I mean, that's genuinely where James's view is on the situation.
Raelene, how was the punishment decided? Is that a standard benchmark, or was it, his personal circumstances taken into account?
Yeah, so the hearing had a submission from Rugby Australia, a submission from the Queensland Reds, a submission from James himself, and also detailed medical advice, and the tribunal takes all of those things into account when deciding the final sanction, and they got to a stage where they believed the minimum base level within our policy was the right level with all of those matters considered.
Are you satisfied that it was enough?
Yeah, I think, at the end of the day, I have to trust a very experienced and very knowledgeable panel, and they had all of the information in front of them, and that was a recommendation they came back with.
Do you think there's enough being done to look after players' mental health? I mean, if they're turning to these sorts of things to deal with those problems?
Can you do more? You can always do more. There's no doubt about that. Do I think we've done enough in relation specifically to educating players about the, unacceptability of using illicit drugs? Yes. Do I think that you always face very difficult situations when you've got anyone, but young men that are facing personal life situations that are outside the norm of playing rugby, and we have to make sure that our welfare systems are in place to look after those people.
Were you guys aware of his mental health issues after the first positive test?
Yes, that became clear, and that he has been in with some doctors and specialists to help him through that situation.
And do you think that that's working well? I mean, given the second test, but overall, what's the picture?
Yeah, I mean, these things are difficult. There's not a defined outcome as to where suddenly you can say, right, this is done and dusted and we've got it all sorted on the person's back. I mean, this whole space of mental health is new, it's a challenge for sport, and one that evolves for everyone in different ways. And so we're very comfortable with the experts we've got working with James.
In that 12-month period where he said he's been suffering depression, were either the QRU or Rugby Australia or Rupa aware of that formally?
I think the time period has become probably news to us throughout this situation, and that's one of the things about depression. If anyone's done any background research and reading on this particular subject, is people work really hard to hide any mental health or depression challenges they have themselves for a very long time before they're prepared to front it. And that's where, as a sport, we need to try and encourage people to come forward earlier, because the earlier they come forward, the more we can help them.
So Raelene, has he been in trouble with the police? Was he arrested, or this was drug testing at his house? Is that?
Yeah, no issue with the police, no issue from that perspective. It's part of our standard illicit drug testing program.
2 weeks out from the first test, probably not the best look again for rugby union on Raelene.
I mean, these things are, it doesn't matter when the timing is, that they're never great things to be dealing with, but all you can do is take them head on. You've got to be open and honest and front them, and make sure that you deal with them in a professional way, both from an organisational perspective but also from a player perspective.
Thanks, guys. Any questions of Ross for this?
What is the process for James now, Ross?
I think he's got to take some time away and look after himself and make sure he gets himself right. I think, speaking with James quite a lot over the course of the last week, his first expression and his first emotion when he found out about the situation was relief. And I think that's an indication of some of the demons that he has been battling over the course of the last little while, that he now has some time to get himself right, away from the daily grind of professional rugby, and clearly he's going to be well supported by a rehabilitation plan and also medical experts working with him.
Is 2 months long enough for us?
I think that's a decision that James and his medical staff will obviously need to take some time to consider. I think ultimately it is the minimum sanction under the policy, and the policy was drafted with these kind of matters in mind. So I have no issues with the sanction whatsoever.
Was it your impression that he turned to the drugs to deal with the depression?
Yeah, I'm not a medically skilled enough person to answer that question. What I would say, though, is I think that James acknowledges that he has made an error of judgment in putting himself in environments that he shouldn't have, which have led to the situation that he's now taking full responsibility for. And I think that he would also acknowledge that his mental state was such that he was not coping well with life generally, which led to that. I think, to touch on a brief point made earlier, is that if there's one real challenge here, it's that even a player of James Slipper's stature and such a well-respected person within rugby still did not feel confident to openly speak out about his issues. And I think as a sport, that's a constant reminder that as much as we talk a lot about mental health, there is still so much more that we need to do.